העדר נוהר במבואות הכפר ועולה האבק משבילי עפר וההק עוצמת ענבלים מלווה את משך הצללים ערב בא, ערב בא.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Welcome to another program here. This is the 1-year anniversary of doing this on YouTube, but I bet you anything we're not going to make it to year 2 on this one. We'll be together soon. A few announcements before we begin. Please don't forget Passover's coming up. Seder in a Box. The deadline is on Monday. And we have our YouTube Seder on Sunday, March 28th. Right here at this channel at 6 p.m. So I hope that some of you can join us. I hope more of you are vaccinated and will have the opportunity to celebrate with friends and family. And one last program night due to Passover next week at Friday night at 6 o'clock. We will be taking the night off. So I hope you all have a wonderful Passover. One last great announcement. Please mark your calendars for Trivia Night, our big fundraiser. It's free and open to all of our members and guests, and it will be on May 15th. There'll be more details coming very, very soon. Let's continue now with our blessing over the Shabbat candles.
Baruch haor ba'olam, Baruch haor ba'adam, Baruch haor b'shalom, b'shalom, Baruch haor, Baruch haor, b'Shabbat.
Tonight I'll be talking about synagogue names. The classical liturgical song associated with synagogues is Ma Tovu. In the Torah, we read a blessing by someone who was actually called upon to curse Israel. Ma Tovu ohalecha Yaakov. How fair, beautiful are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. This reading, an introduction to Ma Tovu, was adapted from a piece by Alden Solovey and Rabbi Eileen Harkavi Hay. How beautiful are our tents when we stand together in unity and in love in the name of hope and harmony. How fragile are our tents when our fears divide us, when we allow outside winds to blow within. Who but we ourselves can define who we are, what keeps us strong, what keeps us whole? Who but we ourselves can shield each other, carrying one another as one against the storm? How fair are our tents when we stand together in the name of unity, in compassion, in strength, for our children and for our children's children. Ken Yehi, may it be so. We continue now with Ma Tovu.
Ohalecha Yaakov, Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu, Ohalecha Yaakov, Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. Likrat Shabbat, Lechu v'necha, Lechu v'necha, Ki mekor משכנותיך ישראל. מה טובו אוהליך יעקב, אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל.
A reading by Rabbi Eva Goldfinger. As one with our forebears, we affirm that righteousness and enlightenment shall be our torch. We shall teach these values diligently to our children all the days of our lives. We shall endeavor to live by these values in the comfort of our homes or on cold and windswept roads. Whether adversity bows our heads or fulfillment makes our spirits soar, our hands shall mete out justice to all, and our eyes shall be open to the light of truth. We shall emblazon our paths through life with this light as a beacon for all humanity. We continue with the song, Ani ve'ata, You and I Will Change the World.
אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. אני ואתה אז יבואו כבר כולם. אמרו את זה קודם, לפניי זה לא משנה. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. אני ואתה ננסה מהחלה. יהיה לנו רע, אין דבר, זה לא נורא. אמרו את זה קודם, לפניי זה לא משנה. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם.
Humanistic Madrich Dr. Gerald Bain wrote, "In whom can we place our belief, ourselves? In whom can we set the soul aglow, ourselves? Who has the power to assuage guilt and to end the reason for guilt? We do, we ourselves, we of human heart and spirit. To whom should we give our first applause? In whose inner being lies the power to exalt our humanness? Let us give ourselves the first applause. Let us reach into our inner selves and find that which we call righteousness. For it is not found in the heavens or beyond the mountain. It is found here, inside our inner human depths. It waits for us to seek it out. Can we give an accounting of our souls? Do we dare to ourselves? What will we find in the recesses of our mind, in the echoes of our past? We have the power and the choice to narrow the abyss between the thought of good and the deed of good. Can we find the will? That question is in part answered by our movement song. We continue with Afo Ori. Once again, Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Last month, our board and membership committee decided that the time had come to pursue a change in our congregation's name, with the goal of creating wider awareness and understanding of our unique mission, which is rooted in Jewish heritage and informed by secular and humanistic values. The name that we currently bear, the Birmingham Temple, was not the result of a deliberative process. It was a kind of placeholder, chosen because the founders met for a time in the Detroit suburb of Birmingham. For the benefit of those of you who don't live in Southeast Michigan, it might be interesting to know that since the early 1970s, our temple has actually been a few suburbs away from Birmingham in a lovely town called Farmington Hills. Tonight, in honor of the process we're about to kick off, I want to talk a little bit about the names that Jews have given our synagogues and our temples and our shuls. And let's actually start with those words. What are the differences between a synagogue, a temple, and a shul? Synagogue, which has Greek roots, means a place to gather. That makes it the closest to the Hebrew term for it, Beit Knesset, house of assembly. That second word, Knesset, is probably familiar to you as the name of the Israeli parliament, the assembly. The first word, Beit, is the Hebrew word bayit, meaning home or house, in its compound word form. In one of the most unfortunate legacies of bad Hebrew to English transliteration, that is, when we write Hebrew and English letters, when German Jews came to America, mostly in the middle of the 19th century, they brought what is quite possibly the most widespread mistransliteration of Hebrew in all of linguistic history, with their weird to English transcription of Beit as B-E-T-H, pronounced by Americans, of course, as Beth. I grew up at a temple called Temple Beth Am, House of the People. And as a young child, I remember wondering, just who is this Beth person, and why is her name on so many temples? That brings us to the word temple. The use of that word is also a legacy of German Jews, specifically early German Reform Jews. In German, just as in English, the word temple, at least among Jews, was originally reserved for the long-gone Holy Temple that sat in Jerusalem. For millennia, Jews have prayed for its restoration. Orthodox Jews still do. But those reformers, well, they weren't interested in bringing back that place of holy animal sacrifice. They said, our synagogues are our temples. And so, in 1818, they gave that name to the very first permanent Reform Jewish house of worship, the Hamburg Temple in Germany. For many years, temple was synonymous with Reform Judaism, while others eschewed it. Later, a few conservative congregations took it on, and I even know of an Orthodox congregation or two with the word temple in their names. This was likely the result of perhaps their immigrant founders' poor English. Today's Orthodox Jews are highly resistant to calling their synagogues temples. They prefer the word shul. As for that word, well, it's Yiddish, related to the word school, and when it's in the name of a synagogue, usually Orthodox, it's meant to put an emphasis on its role as also being a Beit Midrash, a house of learning. For most of Jewish history, naming a synagogue usually reflected its location. Most Jewish towns only had one shul, so the names were not that important anyway, but in places where there were more than one, they frequently took on the name of the street, or sometimes reflected the nusach, the style of prayer that they featured within their walls. Some very old congregations reflected a famous rabbi's involvement with the place. The Wurm synagogue was also called the Rashi Shul, after the 11th century sage. There are many other examples. In the modern era, naming conventions changed a bit. In immigrant-rich America, where Jews from similar places sought each other out, synagogues could be named for the founders' home countries or towns, We find many Anshe, men of Poland or Lita, Lithuania, or Romania. Those are examples of this. But there was an even larger trend of selecting names that reflected a Jewish concept or something that the congregation valued, something that was part of their focus. These included names with words like shalom, peace, or tzedek, justice, kahal, community, sha'arei, the gates of this or that, and so forth. Many chose to designate themselves the house or home of some value or Jewish idea, and that's where our friend Beth came in, though in the past several decades, newer congregations have almost universally corrected that translation so that we find the more appropriate Beit. The founders of the very first synagogue in America led the way with a meaningful name of Sha'arit Yisrael, or Sherith Israel, the remainder of Israel, perhaps because of the paucity of Jews then in the Americas. But as synagogues began to proliferate in 20th century America, there was a burst of creativity and new kinds of names. Some became very popular, which is why we find so many like Beth Am, Beth Shalom, and Beth El. Others looked for more unique names. Back home in Miami, there was a downtown synagogue called Beth David. I think it was named after its founder. When some suburbanites broke away, they chose a more descriptive name for their new synagogue, Beit Shirah, House of Song. Over time, words like tikva, hope, shir, song, and the adjective chadash, new, became more common in names. Here in Southeast Michigan, we have a shir shalom, song of peace, and a shir tikva, song of hope. Our own humanistic congregations have been part of this trend, using words that reflect something about our movement and its values. In New York, there's a Beth Haskalah, House of Enlightenment, a very important principle of our movement. The word or, meaning light, has worked its way into many of our movement synagogue names, as after all, it reflects our movement song, Eifo Ori, Where is My Light? Arizona has Or Adam, the light of humanity. Minnesota, Or Emet, light of truth. And Toronto's choice, which happens to be one of my favorite synagogue names in our movement, uses the single Hebrew word, Orenu, which of course in English is two words, our light, an appropriate name. Humanistic Judaism also features no fewer than 3 communities with the word chaverim, meaning friends, and also members in the title, and that puts the emphasis there on collectivity and belonging. And we have a handful that have been around long enough, like Beth Haskalah, to bear the older transliteration of that word, Colorado's Beth Ami, House of My People, which speaks to our connections to Jewish peoplehood, while Florida's Beth Adam, House of Humanity, speaks to our movement's human-centeredness. When it comes to our Jewish practice in general, our movement of humanistic Judaism places integrity in both practice and in our understanding of authentic Jewish history as a pillar of our philosophy, central to our beliefs. This idea is usually summed up with the phrase, we say what we mean, and we mean what we say. However, at least when it comes to our name, Birmingham Temple, that hasn't really been the case. When Rabbi Wein was with us, this was much less important. He was a national newsmaker, a groundbreaking thinker and leader, invited to speak about humanistic Judaism throughout the world, his name synonymous at the time with Birmingham Temple. That's the profound power of leadership provided by a living legend. But that's no longer the case, as I've discovered in my 8 years here. In his absence, we no longer benefit from the capacity of his vibrant physical presence to remind everyone that the Birmingham Temple is the home of humanistic Judaism. What we do have, though, are his teachings. And what he taught us is that when traditions no longer convey what we really believe, our commitment to integrity tells us that it is time to reimagine them or if necessary, let them go. In making the decision to pursue a name change, our membership committee understands that no selection can possibly bear the entire burden of conveying our congregation's full story, nor all of our beliefs. But they also recognize that a good name should minimally say something important about us. And that's where all of us come in. This presentation represents the kickoff of a multi-stage project designed to claim our new name. Beginning now, we are accepting submissions from anyone in the world who has a good idea. There are no specific guidelines, though we do recommend that submissions in some way reflect our identity as a humanistic Jewish community, that they point to our values and ethics and communicate our intellectual integrity in much the same way that we see with Orenu, our light, or Beth Haskalah, the house of enlightenment, and the other examples that I gave. Submissions might also indicate the ways in which we are human-centered, such as our movement's congregations, or Adam, the light of humanity, or Beth Adam, the home or house of humanity. A good guideline for any submission is that our name will indeed say what we mean and mean what we say. As for what language to choose, Hebrew or English, both can be found in modern synagogues. Some very recently established congregations, and many of those whom I've talked to in our community, feel that an English name would be the right choice, more accessible, more explanatory. Even some long-standing congregations with Hebrew names, for example, the congregation that was the site of the 2018 anti-Semitic attack is named Etz Chaim, which is the Hebrew for tree of life, representing the Torah. That's a word for Torah, or phrase for Torah. But most people today choose to call it the Tree of Life Synagogue, and indeed that's how it appears on their website. So they went from Hebrew to English. If you'd like to suggest a name in Hebrew, which is still the most common way of naming synagogues, there are plenty that are easy to pronounce. And if you're having a hard time thinking of a Hebrew word that might translate some English concept that you have, both Rabbi Miriam Jairus, a member of our congregation, and the rabbi for the Society of Humanistic Judaism, and I, are both available to consult with you. You can find her contact information at shj.org, and of course, always find ours, and along with a contact form, at Birmingham Temple, for the time being, birminghamtemple.org. There's another consideration, too. What about the word temple? The Germans who made it a substitute for synagogue did so because they wanted to focus attention on their congregations as the houses of God. But today, it has other connotations. An opera can be a temple of music, a museum can be a temple of art. And the word also conveys place permanence. It tells people we have a physical home. That's important to folks who are thinking about joining a congregation and could be a valuable element in our name. Even as our movement teaches us to let go of ideas and practices that no longer serve our needs, everyone, including us, becomes attached to certain traditions, and our name is no exception. For this reason, I've been intrigued by some proposals of several members that whatever name we pick, we might want to give some priority to those that hold on to the initials BT. That is, after all, what many of us call our congregation. In the Jewish world, there are quite a few BTs. I used to go to a huge BT, a Beth Torah, the House of Torah, a good name for the kind of synagogue that I was attending back then. My very traditional family and my grandson, his school is in a synagogue called BT. Also, Beit Tefillah, or House of Prayer. That's a good name for them too. But fortunately, there are a whole lot of other Tav, T words in the Hebrew lexicon. So if you'd like to think of some, you can certainly consult us or any Hebrew dictionary. I'm going to give you my own submission, exploit my platform here. I've suggested Beit Tevuna, House of Reason, to use both the English and the Hebrew. But ultimately, it's not my decision. It's an all-congregation choice, and hopefully we will also be able to select from submissions from all over the humanistic and even wider Jewish world. If you do provide a submission, please consider including some of your reasons for selecting the name that you're submitting. When we circulate these on ballots to our BT members, we will include that information too. So let's get our creativity going. Let's start our searches on the webs, talking to our friends, and please feel free to consult Rabbi Jairus, me, or anyone whom you know who has a good idea, has some Hebrew background, as you consider your submissions. We hope to receive a lot. Send your suggestions through the contact form at birminghamtemple.com or to office@birminghamtemple.com. And we will look forward over the next month or so to hearing some wonderfully creative ideas and beginning our process to claim our name. Shabbat Shalom again, everybody, and let's continue with this beautiful song.
ערב של שושנים נצא נא אל הבוסתן מור וסנים ולבונה לרגלך מפתן לילה יורד לאט ורוח שושן נושבה הווה אלך שלח שיר בלט זמר של אהבה.
When we meet each other each Shabbat, we say Shabbat Shalom. It's a wish for peace, right there in our Shabbat greeting. Shabbat has always been a symbol of peace. Our ancestors called it a taste of a better world to come. The peace that they sought to create on Shabbat teased them with hopes that the calm they were experiencing might one day prevail all of the time throughout the world. Perhaps that's just a fantasy, but it gave them comfort nonetheless. We now understand that a better and more peaceful future must not be deferred to some world to come. If we desire it, we must bring it ourselves, in our homes, our communities, our nation, and the world. We possess the power to make it real. Perhaps Shabbat can once again remind us of that. Shabbat Shalom. May we all enjoy a Shabbat of peace. In this community where we find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts toward all those who need our love and support. those who are ill, those who suffer pain of the body or spirit, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. Tonight we extend our well wishes to these members of our community and to their loved ones, to Joe Gaden, Demi Bird, Julie Eliason, Karen Tremper Harris, Myron Tink, and Rabbi Peter Schweitzer. May all who suffer know that they are not alone. May they be healed quickly. May they experience a complete recovery, a refuah shlema, the renewal of their bodies and the renewal of their spirits. Before we continue with our weekly memorial, let us pause for a moment to remember the victims of this week's vicious attack on Asian Americans in Atlanta. Tonight, we extend our condolences to the family and other loved ones of Zhao Jitan, Dao Yufeng, Delana Ashley, Jan Gonzalez, Paul Andre Michaels, Soon Park, Hyun Grant, Suncha Kim, and Young Yu. May their memories be a blessing. We also express our outrage over this heinous act and the way that it has been characterized by law enforcement who have engaged in what has become a usual practice of tiresome and engaging excuses for murderers' behaviors. In this case, presented in part by the sheriff who has promoted the sale on his own website of anti-Asian t-shirts. Attacks on the Asian American community have become widespread as they have been targeted due to anger over the pandemic and the policies of the Chinese government that do not reflect upon them in any way. It is long past time for our government officials to take stronger action against those who target people due to their perceived or actual ancestry. And it is long past time to take action against those in position of authority who have engaged in excusing acts of domestic terrorism. We continue now with our weekly memorial. Our thoughts now turn to those in our community and our loved ones who are no longer with us, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. Let us recall now our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. Tonight, we recognize the yahrzeits of Abraham L. Cohen, David Fleischer, Jermaine Ash Friedman, Larry Gordon, Dorothy G. Grauer, Sophie Lieberman, Alfred Lubeck, Esther Luria, Sam Meyerson, Boyd Musser, Albert Paul, Carl Rossman, Harold Schiff, Martin Shore, George William Trapp, James Walker, Leon Williams, and Irene Young. Yehi zichram livracha. May memories of these beloved people bring some measure of comfort to those who face life in their absence. That's our service tonight. Much to think about, much to celebrate, and also, sadly, something to mourn. We will miss you next week on Friday night, but hopefully see a few of you at least on Sunday evening. I wish you all a very, very happy Passover, as they say in Yiddish. Azisen Pesach, a sweet Passover. Chag Sameach, everybody. We conclude tonight with Peace Be With You. We'll be back 2 weeks from tonight with our Shabbat program.
Peace be with you.